Hello, hello. I actually started the recording before having you all on the call this time just because I love seeing the screen populate with all of your beautiful faces. This is so exciting. I have really been looking forward to this call, everyone. So thank you so much for joining me. Just a reminder that usually in the first minutes of the call, people are still filtering into the waiting room. So sometimes you'll see my attention is a little back and forth as I let people in. But oh, wonderful to see everyone. Lots and lots of familiar faces. My goodness, what a dynamic season of Alone it's been. And after watching the episode this week, I was like, oh, no question. This is such a great episode. I would want to watch it again anyway. Timber said the same thing. So it's like just amazing timing. In terms of the logistics for our watch party, the way it's going to work so that we're not barraged with questions the whole time is we're going to watch it in 15-minute chunks, and then I'm going to pause it, and then we're going to discuss, ask questions, of me, but also, of course, of Timber. He's the true authority for sure on this episode. So I am super excited, not just to have this watch party, but to be hosting Timber as our special guest for this watch party. And those of you who've been keeping up with the season, I'm sure have come to really appreciate him both for his entertainment value, the way he's able to capture his journey. Like he clearly has put a lot of thought into the filming. And oh my goodness, this guy's skill and ingenuity. And I have to say that of all the people I've seen on Alone, I would say Timber and I have a lot of differences. We have very different backgrounds. We've come to this stuff in from very different paths, but the way we approach our time in the wilderness and a lot of our thought processes and the ways that we, bring ourselves around mentally and that we are ingenuitive with the gear that we brought. I like so many of the things that come out of his mouth, even in this season, talking about the specifics of the protein poisoning that you can get from, rabbit starvation and such. I'm like, yes, that's just how I would have done it. That was brilliant. So I really see myself in a lot of his approach, and it's been so gratifying, and I'm so happy to have forged this friendship with him through this season. So yeah, very happy to introduce our special guest, Timber. So Timber, would you like to unmute yourself and just say hello to the group and maybe a little bit of your background and what you see as special about season 11 and your journey, in a 1 to 2 minute soundbite, if
Sounds
that's
good.
remotely possible.
Yeah, I can keep it short. And firstly, thank you so much. It's just it's a great joy just to be able to be on here with you. And I would have to say the things that you just said, well, I treasure that because you're one of my top heroes in the survival world, the earth-based living world. All of these things. You're one of my heroes. And I watched your season years ago. It was the first season I ever watched. And after that, I refused to watch Alone for years because I said, this thing is so good, so pure, and I want to do it. And it hurts me to have to watch it and just sit on a couch and watch it. So I refused after season 6. But since that time, I respect you so highly. And just to be able to be in this conversation with you is such an honor. Thank you. And so I'm just glad to meet all of you today. Timber, Cleghorn, of course, you guys probably know me a little bit, but I would say that what the show means to me, in a nutshell, is just new life. I think what they don't really put on screen is that I came into this so beat down from the effects of death surrounding me from, different things. My little brother just died. They said 2001, but it was 2021, so it was just 18 months before we went on the show. I said 2001 there, but and then I was in a couple places where there was just so much death around, and I couldn't endure, and I went there so down, so down. And on this side of it, I'm so up. Like I couldn't have imagined going through such a transformative thing. I'm literally sitting here with all of the stuff preparing for our new baby. By this under this caribou skin is all of our things, our sheep skins for her to lay on. All the things that babies need. And it's just incredible. Her name. This is the first time I'm going to say this in public at all. Her name is going to be Brooke Mackenzie, and it's named after the experience where I just started wanting a daughter so much. And here we are. We're 6 weeks away or so from having a daughter. And so I think that's really what the show means to me. The experience means to me is just an entirely transformative thing, which is hard to communicate and articulate. But Woniya, like as beautiful as things can be on screen, personally, it just hits so deep to have connection, um, time with the pure life, from all the trees, plants, animals in the wilderness that I value so much. And I think that's one thing that we share together. Probably all of you, we share it with us, is just an intense value for these things. And so I'm glad to be part of the call today, and I hope that I can be a happy person to be around today. I'm just loving it.
Yay. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That feels so special. And I know a lot of you who've watched my journey and read my book know that I really feel like Alone was a big part of what allowed me to have my son as well, on both a physical level and very much on an emotional and spiritual level. So I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, Brooke Mackenzie. Love it. Yeah. Great. Well, with no further ado, we're going to dive into super exciting. So much to talk about. The idea of this is to let you guys ask your questions first and get input from Timber and myself. So Timber, do you have anything you want to speak to in terms of Sarah's dehydration issue and what took her out ultimately,
Yeah,
if
I
you know?
think that your knowledge and studies on this probably will allow you to answer from a better scientific angle. But for me, I would just say that I think folks don't realize how um, quickly you can get depleted from the minerals that allow hydration to be effective in your body. And then it becomes really painful. Like we think just drink water. Well, water doesn't have it, especially if you've boiled it or you've just melted snow. There are none of those very few of those minerals there that you'd need, and your body just doesn't hang on to it. I'm eating right now and I can't gain back weight because of this issue with the minerals. And I sweated so many salts away in the early season, and that was one of my terrible mistakes. And I see Sarah doing that. She's talking about pinching her skin, and I know we're all there pinching our skin right now and seeing how it goes back down. You're like, oh, I think I can live. And it's a low level to be at. But I just think from the aspect of humanity on it, I just, it shocks me how much we need, how many variety of different things. We got to find a mineral lick. We've got to find these things, or we can't even live just with the water and food. It's pretty shocking, and it hurts me. I love Sarah so much, it just hurts me to see her in pain. And Woniya, maybe you have like a scientific angle on, or something to say about, how that really happens, but that's all I have to add, really.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And that the salt buttons were really, really key for me. And also just note that that was Himalayan mineral salt. So it also had some other trace minerals too, because it's essentially dried seawater. So that's really key. But yeah, so my partner Taylor is a chiropractor, so he is technically a doctor. And so we were talking about this, and he said that absolutely the chronic dehydration and what you spoke to, Timber, the change in the mineral balance can really stress the kidneys, and when they get stressed they can become inflamed. And so he said that probably what he saw was the inflammation of the kidneys that she was experiencing, because just like the liver, the kidneys are one of the major filtration organs in the body. The liver is more directly environmental toxins, toxins and what have you, not just environmental. I mean, also ones that go there on purpose, right? Like alcohol really affects the liver. But the kidneys are what are literally filtering your blood. It's taking everything out of your blood, putting back in what you need, and it's what's making your urine. And as we're going to hear more about on this episode, this issue of the protein toxicity from low fat levels. So what protein toxicity does is it actually makes too much nitrogen for your system. And the nitrogen, of course, is what is going into your urine. So that's all on your kidneys to be doing that filtration. So when your nitrogen balance is off, your urine is off, that's massive issues with your kidney. So that was Taylor's take on it as a doctor, was probably inflammation of the kidneys, which yes, 100% would be related to her dehydration and her electrolyte balance. And yes, Greg, the critical electrolyte balance is really hard to get out there. And it's one of the things that I think most people on Alone don't go into it with enough prior knowledge of. So it's definitely, all of these little things you think about shelter, you think about food, water, safety, all of these things without thinking about all of those little things like the constipation, right? Which we saw in a recent episode, the electrolyte imbalances and all those little things that can be truly, truly dangerous, life threatening. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And that I just want to say that that is one of the things that is amazing about watching the episodes as a participant on a current season is you have no idea what was going on with the other participants until actually seeing it for yourself. And it's really, really wild, I find, to have that insight. So Timber, would you address Melanie's question about how it is to watch the struggles of the other contestants?
Yeah, I'm happy to have this question because it brings up something that's I think so important. I know it would be this way in all the seasons, but you can get sucked into a couple of bad mentalities when you're competing against other people, but you're alone. And this is the difference maker with Alone. It's it doesn't feel like a competition, but then it is a competition. But your competition is absolutely invisible. And so, but you hold them in your mind. And you can get trapped in a mentality of being against them, like, oh man, I hope that they aren't being as successful catching fish. I hope that they aren't being as successful, keeping their digestion going. You can think that sometimes, but then if I see them on screen, I see Sarah, she's got the kidney pain, and I see Dub break his glasses, it breaks my heart. And I would just, competition or no, I wish I could just hike through the land and get over there and hug and be like, you got this. You can do this, you can make it. And that's what it makes you want to do. So just watching everybody struggles is heart-rending because you can feel a bit of it. You can feel what it's like to lay there and be in intense pain, but then you can think back, like back when it was a competition, I wanted to be the only one doing well. And Alone kind of takes you out of that aspect of community in your mind, and that rips a part of the human mind. It's hard, it's painful. It's painful because we need that. We need to share and give compassion. And oh my gosh, just watching the people go through this stuff, like Dub with his glasses, I'm like, oh, it's so bad to give him some glasses, just because it's a hardship. It's a hardship. It's just tough to watch people go through it, and it's hard to experience it, even know them that they're okay. Like I talk to Dub on the phone all the time. And then I watch him go through it and I'm like, dang man, I just want to fix it. I just want to fix it. So it's like that, just that juxtaposition of what Alone puts you in, being in competition against them, and then remembering the humanity of it. And you're like, I wish that we could have gotten together in a village and encouraged one another, but then it wouldn't be Alone, would it?
Yeah, it's an interesting interplay. Yeah, my goodness. And I have to say that I thought that there was something in the rules that allowed for a spare pair of glasses for people who require glasses because it's such a handicap. I mean, it's really, I mean, just being someone who needs glasses anyway, even if your glasses don't break, that is a serious issue to have to be dealing with out there. And then broken, I mean, it's amazing that that didn't take him out. Not being able to see when you're in a survival situation, that is majorly life threatening. So I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't a backup plan in the rules, and that if there was, that he didn't contact production to say, hey, I really need that spare pair of glasses. Do you remember, Timber, if there was?
I thought the same thing when I watched the scene. I thought there was talk of a second pair of glasses could be on hand, but it may be like the bowstring. They told us to bring a second bowstring, but we weren't allowed to take it. And it was just in case one of the crew members cut our bowstring on the way to launch because they'd had some incident before, and then it was just there for that. And I thought, oh, great, I'll get to take a second bowstring. But no, they're like, no, put that away. That's kept for you at the base camp. And they won't give it to you unless it's on launch day that a crew member cuts your string, because that would be a unfair disadvantage. So I don't wonder if the glasses are like that. I don't know, but I
Yeah.
was surprised because I thought that maybe there was talk of that, somewhere in the rules. But since I don't have glasses, I didn't retain that information.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and that might have been my miss too. Also, interesting that you say that because my bow, the knock actually got nicked off. I mean, it was still functional, but it was just the wood that was left. It wasn't the little reinforcing piece of horn slash plastic to reinforce my knock. And I didn't realize it until the helicopter took off. So when they launch you on Alone, on the seasons where you're launched with a helicopter, which both of mine were, they put your gear in the little mesh wire mesh back box on the outside of the helicopter because there's no room inside. So, you know, your backpack, your bow, all that stuff is, and then they set it down on the ground when they take off. And so I didn't realize until a helicopter took off that my knock had been damaged. And I didn't bring an extra knock. I mean, that wouldn't work. So you see what I'm saying? Like the tip of my bow where the string fits in, which is a very high tension point. Luckily it didn't break, but I had very, very little to shoot at on the frozen season anyway. So it was less of a factor.
That's very nerve-wracking, though. I mean, imagine like there's a flaw in your bow, there's a malfunction of some type, and that even can change the geometry with your string length just a tiny bit if it's that part that's missing. So that would be so nerve-wracking. Like, how can they send me off like this? So, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it was definitely a stressor. But again, like I said, I had almost no game that I could shoot at on the frozen season, which is part of why William was my pick from the beginning, because Labrador, man, that is a brutal environment for wilderness survival. So I've always been like, boy, I tell you what, the Labrador season to me was a much harsher environment than where we were in the Arctic. I came to see that the Arctic was really abundant when I was living in Labrador. So I'm just so curious to watch the rest of William's journey unfold. And I feel like this is the first episode where we really see William truly laid low. Like everybody else seems to have been struggling, and William has just been so steady. And we're gonna be seeing some shift in the balance, as Greg already mentioned in the chat. Thank you, Jali, for that insight about the sodium potassium pump. Yeah. And Jill, yes, I loved that Frozen was the first season that I was invited on. Season 7 was similar. Like I really disliked the competition aspect. And I have to say that in my first season, season 6, it did not feel supportive going in. Like a lot of the contestants were kind of like posturing and a little like psychological warfare before we went in. And I thought it was really gross. I really didn't like it. I tended to just like isolate myself socially because I didn't want to engage in that. And so part of what allowed me to say yes to a second season was the idea that on Frozen, we could all win. We were only competing with ourselves and the environment, not with one another. I loved that. So yeah, that's really hard when you're a compassionate person who really cares about all of the other people out there. It's a weird thing to have it feel like a competition when that's not where your heart is. Other comments, questions? So I saw all kinds of wonderful comments about Sarah during her tap out in the chat. And to me, this is just so poignant. What she expressed, I feel like you haven't really it's hard to verbalize, right? Because I don't want to take anything away from anyone else's experience. But to me, that soul transformation that Alone can bring us to is part of the beauty of the Alone show. And I feel like people who tap out before they've really reached that huge transformative journey of being able to see themselves in a different light are really missing out on a key part of the experience. So I love what Sarah shared. I loved what all of you were sharing. And it is so transformative. And for me, it absolutely healed so much of my self-doubt, of my limiting self-thought and talk. And we see that so much in Sarah. And you can see that throughout her experience. She doesn't talk super kindly or super kindly about the environment to herself. And I think that that's really true, that if we don't have that self-love, it's harder to see that love in the environment. And we absolutely saw that arc in Sarah coming in, you know, with some harsh language and then going out with this sense of deep healing. And so I just really, really loved that about Sarah's journey. Oh, I also wanted to note, Sarah did that test of her hand skin for dehydration test. It's also a test for hypothermia. So your hands are really great out there in terms of giving you a map to how the rest of your body is doing. So being able to touch your thumb and your pinky together is one of the things that lets you know whether or not you're having some hypothermia danger. So that was just something I thought of.
I could barely do that on a normal day. Like I have to almost use my second hand to get my two fingers together on a normal day. And so I was trying to do that test. And I'm like, I've always got hypothermia. I'll have to tell a different way.
I guess it's something where you need to be familiar with the way your own personal hands work and look for
Yeah.
the change rather than, yeah. I
Yeah.
have narrow hands. If you've got like beefy muscular hands, it might be different. Yeah, good point. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about, Timber, with our scene from you, although also like obviously that scene with the medieval peasant and lord and the hair and the spelling, that was just so brilliant. And I talk about that hair interplay in my book because I used hair triggers for my snares, but it was literally my own hair. Oh, your sore teeth, because that is like my teeth were a huge issue for me on season 6 and on Frozen. I broke a tooth both seasons, luckily not in a place that was in a really awful place in my mouth, like I could get through it both, but I had a ton of dental work after my first season. So I was curious if you wanted to talk a little bit more about the soreness you were having in your teeth, because this is another of those issues that happens on Alone that we see very little about as the viewers. So I really identified with your experience out there.
Yeah, it got to be a big deal, and I don't want to put any spoilers from the future in, but I have really problematic teeth anyways, and I have for a long time, probably genetics or something, but a dentist in India when I was in a remote place worked me over one time, and since then my mouth has been really problematic. So as I eat the jerky now, like it's okay, I can chew it up, but at the time it got like it was so hard just because my gums would bleed all the time. The roots of my teeth would be intensely sore, so much that then when I ate a soft boiled fish, I mean very boiled, so smushy, my teeth would ache even just going through that smushy like mashed potatoes. And so I did a lot of things that you're not going to see on there. Like I boiled the jerky, and then I pounded it with an axe into a pulp and then ate that and then boiled that pounded pulp as well. So I tried a number of things with it so I could keep ingesting it. But either way, I'm probably still over rationing because of my personal tendencies. But that teeth issue became really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I experienced not that bad, and I think that I don't have bad teeth going in, but I mean, I got bad teeth from my Alone experience. It's like the one lasting long-term damage that I got out there was tooth issues. And on Frozen, I really, again, there's so many ways that I see my own journeys in yours, but on Frozen, especially towards the end of the season, you can see I'm always like I sound funny and I look funny because I'm always messing with my teeth and the footage. Because when you're filming, you have no idea what's going to be shown by the show and what isn't. So you just have to go on with your life. So I had this issue where I was finding a way to the seaweed there was not very digestible. Like Michelle couldn't eat it. It made her throw up every time. I found a way to neutralize the ick factors in it and make it edible, but that looked like boiling it, dehydrating it, roasting it so it's brittle, and then eating it. But even so, I would eat it dry, and then it would wedge between my teeth and then rehydrate in my mouth, which shoved all of my teeth apart. And it got it so wedged in there that nothing I could do. I made little picks out of rabbit bones. I used thread from my clothes as dental floss. Nothing I could do would get that seaweed out of my teeth. And by the time I came out, same, like my teeth were so sore. I had big spaces between all of my teeth that hadn't been there before that food would get caught in. It was a nightmare. And it was several months after I got back that finally my teeth weren't causing me constant problems. And again, you can watch this on the Frozen season. I'm always kind of like messing with stuff in my teeth. It looks like a weird social tick or something, but that is why. Yeah.
Yeah, that is such a big deal, like getting it jammed between there because the jerky would do that, get in between, a fiber would get in between the teeth and I couldn't get it. But I also had a rabbit leg bone that was sharpened, I was using for a pick, but then you're just always at it and then you jam your gums a little bit trying to get deep in there and they bleed more. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rough. All the little rough things that they don't show. And then watching the episodes brings it all back. Justin, I see your hand up. And then after that, we're going to transition back to watching again.
Awesome. So Woniya, I'm familiar with what knowledge you brought into into your seasons, but for timber, you did a lot of things that I don't know if you did previously. So if you could just touch on what knowledge you brought into the season, and then what did you figure out while you were out there, like you just mentioned, uh, the way you ate, boiled, and consumed the jerky. Have you done that before? Your cache was freaking amazing. Have you done stuff like that before, or did you kind of just did it come to you out there when presented with those situations?
Thanks, man. Good questions. And I think the food cache, and thank you for that compliment, by the way. I think the food cache was the biggest thing that just came to me after a few days of laying there just wrestling on it all night. What do I do? Because the need to protect the meat can't even be exaggerated on the show. They can never show the army of mice and birds that storms it, and then your anxiety that a bear will come. And the chance that a bear will come is it's like it may not come at all, but if it comes, it'll take all the meat. So that stresses so much. And I lay there, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. If I put this stuff up in a tree like Jordan did, that will not stop the pine marten and the mice and the birds, and I'll still have to build a dense box up there, and there's no straight logs like as big as your arm to work with. None of it. I just had those huge trees or the twisty willows. And I was stressed out so badly about it. And then I thought, I got that moose hide and I want to sleep on it, but I can give up that if it can keep the critters out, and so that kind of just came to me while I was laying there. The shelter building, I've brought in more of that, I've done that kind of stuff a lot. And then I just wanted to wait and see the land to be like what has to be built. So the like the gorge hooks, well, we can't talk about that yet, I guess. We'll talk about the gorge hooks more in a little bit here. But I think the food cache kind of just dawned on me in the night sometime. Like William said, you lay there and you get good ideas. But I thought that going into this, I looked amongst the contestants and I thought, a lot of us aren't from around here, this Arctic type terrain. Only William is, and then Michaela had some good experience in that kind of terrain. And I said, so what it's going to come down to who can learn fast, and I think that's the approach that we all want to take into life is just like learn like a 6-week-old puppy every day if we can, just like learn with open eyes. And I wanted to do that, but then eventually, that's why I said at one point that brain fog would be my biggest enemy, because when it sets in and you're not just thinking clearly, then you're not learning as fast and you're not seeing those golden paths that you can follow, to get some success, and so that can shut you down. So that's to me the big deal is like learning fast, and then when your brain stops functioning right, you stop learning, you're on a one-way trip, you're gonna shut down. So sorry, did
I
I?
muted myself there.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that, Timber. Generally speaking, I always say that it is not the skills that you go into alone with, it is your ability to be flexible and ingenuitive. And when we think that we have our survival skills dialed and we're focused on that rather than curiosity about the environment and what does this place call for and how can I adapt the skills I have to this completely different environment, that is what makes you.
Perfect. Thanks to you both.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna bring my boy over because I know Taylor had him out walking and just brought him back. So I know that seeing Hawthorne is a highlight of folks on these calls. So I didn't want to miss a chance. He's staring because I have this other computer going beside me in case I need to come in. So he's seeing a lot more screen than we normally let him screen and let him watch. But this is the boy, and now he's staring at Papa. But yeah, it's been so sweet having him get older and more interactive, and actually today is literally his 6 months birthday. Shall we dive back in to the episode? Yeah, my goodness, so much going on in this little sequence. Starting with that scene with William, and that question, I was wondering, Timber, if you, having been there and known what were out on the landscape, if you have, any better informed ideas about what you think might have gotten into William's food cache there.
I think your text message summed it up because something really strong but really tiny. Like I didn't see in the scene before that. They just don't show all the footage to know if he remembered to put it in the bottom and put the rocks on. So barring any lapse in memory, and we can't address that because it's not shown, barring any of that, I think that it had to be a mink or a weasel or ermine, like you said, because nothing else would be strong enough without just throwing those rocks. Even a wolverine would have those rocks thrown all over the place. And heartbreaking scene, you know, because just seeing how hard it hits him, an even keeled guy like William, and he's pushed right to the edge in that scene, man, and it hits hard. But I think your guess, because the mink were all over us. They've shown a couple mink on screen, and the martens were thick too, but the mink were even thicker for me. They were just like you could hardly beat them off with a stick, and you weren't allowed to kill them. So, I think that's a good guess on what probably happened.
Yeah, yeah. And we're, because I was also in the Northwest Territories on season 6. I don't know if you guys had ermine there, but I saw a lot of ermine up on Great Slave Lake on season 6 too. And this is just an interesting talking point. Ermine and weasels are the same thing, but when they're in their winter color phase, which is white with a little black tipped tail, they're called ermine. And when they're brown, they call them weasels. So it's a little bit confusing. But yeah, but they're insanely strong. Like, so all the things in that family, wolverines in that family, marten, fishers, mink, weasels, they are insanely tenacious for their size. I mean, like a weasel that's literally this big and then its tail that big can drag a full-sized snowshoe hare off. So that's why I went there. Minks are also small, but they're significantly bigger than weasels. So, but yeah, I haven't been there, and I didn't see mink on season 6. I saw tons of ermine. So, or not tons, but like a lot of ermine sign, and I did see them. Oh, one thing that was from the prior segment, but when we saw William eating the foot, he's like, oh, delicious beaver feet. And again, I think that most people would not consider it such, but beaver are amazing. They're such a fatty creature. That's why he was so laid low. It would have been great if he had eaten the beaver tail instead of the foot, because beaver tails are their fat storage device. So it's like solid fat, and it's a really, really nutrient dense, rich fat. So I'm like, oh man, if only he had eaten, the liver and the fat first and then started working on the less palatable bits. Like, I probably would have left the feet for the last thing. I did get desperate enough to eat hare feet on season 6, and they're, well, far less delicious, I'm going to say, than beaver feet. Timber, yeah.
So for probably most of you caught this, but in case anyone hasn't, we're only allowed to kill one beaver, which is why it's such a critical issue when William gets a small one and that disappoints him. He's not ungrateful, but if you can only get one, a 15-pound beaver is a real disappointment, and then when he loses it. So it's about the rules there. You're only allowed to get one beaver.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people, watch Alone without the rules in mind. And they're thinking, but there's mink. Why wouldn't William have killed the marten? Like, you will be disqualified. You could be sent home if you break the rules, and you're still subject to game laws. And Alone typically tries to run their seasons in native lands, and that's for a reason. It's so because native peoples in Canada are sovereign, right? They don't have to follow all of the same rules that everywhere else in Canada does, but you need to work out what is going to be legal for the season with that group of native people. And so in Labrador, we were working closely with the native people there, the Nunatsiavut, or I shouldn't say we, I mean the History Channel, and they were very liberal with what they allowed us to take. We had like pretty much free reign compared to a normal season. And then the Alone show actually was like, yeah, no, even though they said that's okay, like they were like, if you need to eat seal, you can eat seal. And the Alone show said, yeah, no, if we show people killing seals on television, everyone will hate us and all of it. So you guys can't kill seals, But what we didn't know going in, and you never do know, it's like you've got your game list and then you've got what's actually in your environment. So William seemed to have been lucky in having access to that beaver. Not everybody necessarily did in their sites, but yeah, it's not just a free for all. It's not true survival, right? It's still within the rules set by both the government, the tribe, and the Alone show itself. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a critical thing of knowing that beaver. Like, why was William disappointed to find a beaver in his snare? Well, it's because it was a really young beaver and a small beaver, and that means he doesn't get to have a big, meaty, delicious, beaver that's going to last him a long time. So I loved that Timber brought up the protein starvation, which is a really big deal. And 100%, like the fact that you had moose lard meant that you were the only person out there who really didn't have to worry about that. You know, that's awesome. That's really, really nice. I got around that by bringing pemmican as a ration, which is a really fatty food. And so I would have a little bit of pemmican every time that I ate some of my lean game. And that helped me not go into the protein toxicity. But I was wondering, you know, it can lead to diarrhea, nausea, fainting, and eventually death. So I would question whether or not that's what Dub was sick from, except that he's been eating mostly fish. Like if he had been eating mostly squirrels and hare, I would think, oh, I wonder if we're starting to see rabbit starvation in him. But I don't think that was the case here. One thing that Taylor and I mentioned is that we love how ice is a 2-syllable word for William here, the ois. And it's like every episode, his Labrador accent gets stronger and stronger, and there's more and more subtitles when we're watching a scene with William. And I just love it. William is so endlessly entertaining. And I love that he brought himself back around. You know, we see him more devastated than we ever have. And in the next scene, he's even killed William again. So very curious to see how his accent and his demeanor, you know, carry on in further episodes.
Hey, so I got a question for Timber, and to you, but I got a question for Timber. You know, I see it looks like you handle your stress with like the stress of what you're going through sometimes with like a lot of humor, like how you can compensate for it, or is that just your natural self to do it? Because I mean, you're hilarious in a great way, but then man, how you can educate too is another way. That's all I gotta ask.
Thank you very much for that. And it's everyone's encouragement on that is awesome, because I never know how I'm gonna hit people. Some of the goofy stuff I do, I'm just like, wow, that was weird, you know. But this skit at the beginning, I didn't even remember doing it with the British accent and stuff. I didn't even remember doing that. But with the humor and stuff, I think it's a critical part of how to get through stuff, but it's not naturally me because, well, I don't know if it's natural or not, because when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to do any humor or any sarcasm or anything like that. Like when I tell in my story, I'm leaving out a lot of parts. I really did grow up in a ton of fear. There was a lot of abuse there. Just you could barely live or breathe, you know. Like if you were caught smiling into a mirror, you'd be punished severely, you know. So I don't want to say these things on the show because I don't ever want to bring shame upon my parents. They already won't speak to me over it, you know, and then I don't want to push it farther apart. So I'm careful on the show. So I came into society at like 19 years old, and I didn't even know how to tell if people were joking or not. But then being on aid missions and stuff, I'd get into tough situations, a lot of stress, you know, and a lot of things. And then I ended up being around mostly like groups of ex-Marines who are combat medics, and they want to go back to war zones and help people because it's where their heart is. And they have the humor, but it's like a offbeat kind of humor. It's like a soldier's humor. You know, it's like to see a dark situation and be like, yeah, this will kill us. It's awesome. And that's kind of, I just adopted that and I brought it into my life as a survival mechanism. And I think it's genuinely me now to be this way. But it's a newer thing, you know. In the last 15 years, I've learned that, you know, and it's really helped me out a lot. So, but that's a good question. Did I answer that okay for you?
Oh yeah, I think it's a great way of compensating. I don't think a lot of people realize, like in third world countries, about a lot of, you can see things in books, but actually being there, especially in war-torn countries, I mean, it's a lot of trauma people go through, and I think humor is like one of the best ways for compensating for it.
You're spot on, and you can see it in the folks there too. It tears my heart up so bad when you see children be traumatized, and then you'll see one find a groove with humor and a way to frame it, and you'll see survival spring up in that person, and you think, wow, that's the way. So you're totally right about that, and I respect that insight. You're very, very spot on.
Thank you for answering the question.
You don't have to edit out anything from today, but I just want folks to know there's a lot more there. You know, there's a lot that I just didn't even want to say to the camera on the show. All the things today is fine, but you know, it's not my intention to ever shame anyone. And you know, I don't want my parents to be torn up. You know, I'd like to speak to them again someday. All the things we've said today is fine, but it's just it was tough. I had to be out there 40 something days before I could even say any of those things. And it was a really tough just thing to push through. But on the other side of it, I felt well. I felt well. I'm like, first time in my life I've ever told somebody who timber is, and that was just as fun to me as making these little guys in that scene too, the gorge hooks, which it was just so fun. I started having fun about day 40, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how long it takes for healing, like you have to really push through the first couple of weeks. You're just scratching the surface. It's that metaphor of peeling back the layers of the onion, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of soul searching and a lot of deprivation, I think, to really
Yeah.
get to those deep places.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Yeah. All right. I'm going to take another look at the gallery view to see if I see any hands raised before we dive in to watching the last little bit. Timber. Yeah, of course.
I don't want to go over anybody else who wants to raise their hand, but if no one else does, I want to add one little thing about this segment, if possible.
Please.
But anybody else first? Okay, so basically it was that the rabbit, the hair snaring scene. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about how brutal things look like that on camera. The hare's head pops off and there's blood everywhere, and I'm sorry that it's that way. It's brutal, but nature and survival, it can be kind of brutal. But I love those animals, and I'm just apologize about the brutal aspect of the way nature stuff like that can look, and just hope everybody's fine with that. But that's the real me is to value so much what those animals represent.
Thank you. I had a note about that too. And again, like it's crazy the parallels between not just your journey and mine, but what they show, because I had the same thing on Frozen. It actually happened to me twice on season 6 also, where I had made my snare loop too big and the animal passed all the way through and got caught by their hips. So they were like dangling from their pelvis, which is really desperately uncomfortable and fearful for them. And so it's a terrible,
Yeah.
terrible thing to see. Like snaring done well can be the most humane way to kill an animal, because it literally just cinches off the blood supply to their head so they fall asleep. It's not even strangulation, like gasping for air. It's not. It's pushing on the arteries supplying the brain with oxygen, so they don't even know it's happening. It's quick and painless. Not
Yeah.
done well. And it's not about the skill of the person necessarily. Like it's nature. It's unpredictable. So it looked like maybe that
Happenstance.
hair was caught by the leg. Was that where
No,
it was caught?
that one was caught by the neck, but I think it had been caught just like 5 minutes before I got there, something like that, or just right before I got there. So it was caught by the neck, but it's funny in the scene, they show two different hairs. Because when the first I approached and I said, "Oh, I've got one over here," that hair's laying there dead, and then they cut, and I'm like, after a commercial break, I'm like, "Oh, I gotta whack this hair." Two totally different hairs. So I'm catching more hairs, but that the first one just was out, and the second one, I think it had just got in the snare. And it was a big hair, unusually big. And I'm like, it can pop that copper wire. So I've got to get on it quick. So I just went after it quick, and I like to do that, to get after them quick so that there's no suffering. But man, I've had some people text me after that scene saying how horrible I am, and just kind of cussing me out and stuff like this. And I'm like, well, the hair wasn't cussing me because it was real quick. So
Yeah, it's really hard. I had that too. And I had one thing that happened on the Frozen season, which I was so horrified by, where I had set a baited cubby for a fox and it had gotten in and gotten caught, I think by the foot, because I had seen it briefly struggling, but it was early morning light. It was hard to see. And then it got back out. And then I went and I show it left a foot behind. And it made it seem like it was the fox's foot, like it had twisted off its own foot, but it wasn't. It was the hare's foot that I'd had as bait inside that cubby. And I got some real hate mail about that too. And it shows me being really nonchalant. And like, if I knew that I had been responsible for this fox twisting off its own foot and going off into the world maimed, I would have been so beside myself, so horrified, so grief. Like it would have been written all over me. And in the footage, I'm just like, oh, it left a foot behind, And so that was really hard. I felt really misrepresented. And the editors probably didn't know. But I also had a situation where a rabbit was caught by the neck and wasn't dead. And it was because I used snare wire that had, it was like craft wire, not true snare wire, and it was springy, and I didn't realize that. So it wasn't cinching down, and I had to kill the hare. And they showed it, like they showed the scene, they showed me diving onto the rabbit, they showed the rabbit, the hare screaming, you know, the sound of it screaming, and then the blood on the snow. And similarly, I was like, wow, that makes this scene really brutal and really hard to watch. And it is what happened, but it's such a little slice of what happened that it really impacts the viewers who, you know, don't have that experience likely. And it's just really hard when the show shows one side and not the other, and it's often the really dramatic parts, right? Because that's what really draws the audience in. So yeah, I thank you, and I 100% identify with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Timber, and one of my favorite parts of Alone is watching the creations that everybody makes, the shelters, the hooks that Timber made. And it feels like they don't show that as much as they used to. And when I saw Deb's shelter and Timber's structure, I was so excited, but I didn't really get to see him a little bit, but not like they used to. And I miss that because Timber, you and Woniya remind me so much of each other, where I felt like I was in this awesome education class where I was learning, because every time you showed us something, you explained what you were doing and why you were doing it and what would hopefully happen when you used it. And I really appreciate that a lot. And it's amazing. And I thought I saw this episode, but I haven't seen it yet. So it was very exciting to see it because I haven't seen it. So I'm very excited. I have no idea what's going on, but thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. I really enjoy, and Timber, I hope you're going to write a book too, because I love Woniya's book. So thank you. Just wanted to say thank you mostly, and very, very excited.
Well, thank you so much for that. The kind words and all, it makes a big difference because this experience is so huge, and the 5 minutes per week that gets to be put on screen, Woniya has probably told you this before, it's hard to see it slip by into thin air, oof, you know, and just like, wow. So thank you for those words and stuff. And I'm with you. I like to see what people do there, the shelters and the builds and all that kind of stuff. And knowing that you guys might like to see that, I actually brought some gorge hooks here so that I can discuss those if anybody wants to. These are actually the moose bones, you know. And so I was out of my mind thrilled when that actually worked, and I pulled fish in on that. I'd had them in my mind but never had success on them before. And but yeah, it's just thank you for saying all of that, and thank you for looking forward to more news from it, because there's a book for sure.
I'm glad you shared. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say that or not. So yeah, I'm glad that you're to the point of being ready to share, because so much of Timber's experience, both background and obviously on the show, you know, we're gonna have ways to learn more about that. And I've been privileged to get some early sneak peeks at it. So I'm super, super excited to have that carrying on, and that you're able to talk about it a little bit. Again, if you need me to edit this out, I could for the YouTube version.
No, this is great because I put out the announcement yesterday. The History Channel finally approved it, and I put the announcement up, and I've been taking emails to sign up for the pre-release list. I'm just receiving emails for all of that, and it's a hard thing to navigate through, but this is a great way to thank you, Woniya, for just all of this that you've set up, just all the opportunity, and just wow. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So we just had a you're super, super welcome. It's been my pleasure. Yeah, it's been great. There a question just came through in the chat asking about how you use the gorge hooks and if you use bait on them or use them bare. So if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, let me see if am I still coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically I used bait on the gorge hooks. I had been saving the guts from the fish all along, and this fish that I catch on the gorge hook is close to my 50th fish by now. And so You know, I had a really good fishing success there, and I'd been saving that bait. And each time I would get fish, I would make little stashes in the riverbank of the guts and stuff. And then I would hollow out pieces of wood and put guts in there. And then as the cold weather comes, I'm cracking those open and using those guts for bait. So what happens is basically this gorge hook piece has to be able to swivel really freely, because when it's swallowed, it has to look like this. If everybody can see that, okay, let me turn it around here, maybe on the dark background. It has to look like this, and you push it through the bait so that if my hand were the bait, it's got to be concealed like so. And then this tip of the bone protrudes out of the bait, and you got to leave this exposed, because that's basically the tip of your hook. So this line right here, when the fish swallows it, it comes up over it. You got to have a loose line so the fish can carry it around until he swallows it. It can't be tight, you know, or else the fish it'll just be in his mouth and he'll spit it out. But when it's loose, the fish swallows it on down, and this goes down into his belly. And then this tip of the gorge hook that we see right here will catch and pull when the line gets tight. And as it catches and pulls, it'll protrude through, and then it comes perpendicular like this. So let's say my fingers are the pike, the entrance of the pike throat, then it'll be sticking through both like this. So it has to be kind of razor sharp. And the reason I use bone is because it has to be a substance that doesn't get soft while it soaks in the water. And all the wood that we find up there will just get soft as it soaks in the water, and then it wouldn't be sharp to be able to pierce like that. And so that's why I wanted bone for that. And that's why I went out there in the woods where the grizzly bear had taken the bones, is to get him for that, because I had lost so many hooks. The pike were huge, and even using steel leaders, they would just rip off the lines constantly. And so I was down to just 4 hooks, and I just needed some answers. And so I went out there, and it was risky, but I had to get those bones. And the bear could have been there, I don't know, but I had to get those bones. And so they really came in handy. And I'm glad that thank you for that question. I'm glad to be able to kind of show you guys these. To me, it was as fun as killing the moose, you know, that little project. So
Yeah, I'm so glad that they gave us the opportunity through showing that to talk about this, because that's the thing with gorge hooks. They can work great, but you really have to understand the mechanism, whereas a hook is just a hook, it's not changing, but a gorge is dynamic, right? So you need to make sure that they can swallow it, and then using bait soft enough that it can bust out of the bait, right, in order to turn perpendicular and lodge in the fish like that. So they're one of those things that you have to know all of the particulars of the mechanism in order to get work. So awesome, you know, exploration of you doing that, and seeing your success was so great.
Thanks. That was one of my favorite things of the whole season. So I was glad to see it on screen. I was afraid that they'd cut it, you know, or maybe I hadn't filmed it well, but it was there, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of these things that we're not sure whether or not they would make it onto the screen, I took a screenshot during the section to show something that Dub made that's in the background that we never see in any of the episodes thus far. And the same thing happened to me all the time. I made so many things, like the things I made out of that sweater on the frozen season. There were so many, and they didn't really show them ever. You just had to really pay attention to like the background and such. And so here's a thing from Dub, and I want to see, it's probably going to be really hard to see. Okay, so right there, that thing right there, can anyone, I know it's a terrible view of it, but can anyone tell or have any guesses what that is in the background of Dub's shelter there? I'm gonna go to the gallery view. Any thoughts, guesses about what that might be?
It's not a great picture, but it looks like a frog spear. You know, with
Right, yeah, a gig.
Yeah.
Like Justin put in the chat. So yes, so it's a fish spear, because up in the Arctic, I'm guessing that they aren't going to have any amphibians. But yeah, so it's a type of primitive fish spear that you make by taking a sapling, splitting it so that it has several different tines, and then putting a little hook on all of them. And we saw Dub losing some fish, right? And so that would be a way, if you know you have a fish on the line, if you can spear it and then pull it out so that you know you've got a grip on it. So I'm wondering if this was made as a reaction to him having lost some fish. But yeah, there's all kinds of cool ingenuity, all kinds of neat things that people are making that we often don't see. And so if you really pay attention, it's fun to be able to see some of these things. Also, sometimes in the background, you can see things that the Alone show doesn't want you to see, like the camera cases. Every once in a while, you know, they give us these waterproof boxes to keep the cameras in. Of course, they need to keep those safe. You're not supposed to have them in the shots, but especially as the season goes on, it's hard to really be on all of the things that you're not supposed to do because just survival is so much. But every once in a while, there's also like a plastic card that tells you how to use the camera. And sometimes you'll see that. They showed that in a Frozen episode. I was actually using it to divert water from coming onto my sleeping bag. I was like lining the ceiling of my shelter with any plastic refuse I could find to make an internal roof to keep the water off of me, because when we had thaws, it would drip. So anyway, just interesting, the things that you see by really having that broad vision that you don't see in the show. Yeah. Let's see. So other comments, questions about the things we saw in this final bit, and Jaylee, I see your hand again. And then also, because this will be our final discussion, also anything from the rest of the show too. Yes, Jaylee, if you want to unmute.
Hey, I just want to say, I love the positivity of the of the people that are coming in now. You were a great inspiration and a positive person. Timber, you were awesome. It looked like in the beginning the show was like a little bit negative and stuff, but now as the years are going by, there's more positivity coming in, and it's a great inspiration. And both you guys have done awesome, and you inspired so many people. So I just want to thank you guys for that.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because I think it actually shows the arc of learning of the producers of the show, because early on in the seasons, they were taking a lot of these folks who presented really tough, who had a lot of bravado and a lot of ego often, because that's the way, like, Alone has changed the face of the survival. And at one time, it was the Rambo characters and the man versus wild and all of this kind of tough guy display that people associated with survival. And that was who the show mostly picked. And it's been 11 years now, 11 seasons, 12 seasons counting Frozen. And they've seen that those people often aren't the ones who go long term, because the more you think you're a tough guy and you go in with ego instead of humility, the more you're going to get leveled, right? And maybe not be able to recover from that fall off of your pedestal. It's the people who are willing to go deep, to be humble, to learn, and change over time. Those are the ones that actually have the long-term staying power. So it depends if you are looking at like short-term survival, where you actually can just grit it out and, wrestle your way out. But that's not going to do for months. You can't do that for months, right? And Alone is about endurance and the long-term survival, not really survival, but wilderness living. And it takes a different kind of person and a different kind of heart to do that. So yes, you are right that they have changed the editing and their selection process over the years. And that's why I find that the later seasons have been way more compelling and interesting, right? Because it brings that out of people.
Can I address that one too for 1 sec?
Oh, please.
So I couldn't agree more that you have to approach the wilderness like that with humility to be able to learn. But I think a lot of the guys that have a super high level of bravado about it, and people thought really that I would be that way, because in the teaser I have the scene with the shirt off going oh like this, and that kind of made people think he's going to be that guy. But that was, of course, just a skit, So I think that you have to approach it with humility, and you see occasionally in my aid work, I see people that maybe did really well in the military. Maybe they were an alpha male for a few years, and then they just have that, like, I will bulldoze through anything. And then they don't realize that without your rations and without these ingredients of support system, you're just going to become weak. And it's shocking and unsettling and horribly uncomfortable for them, and they can't handle it. We have to be able to come to terms with our own weaknesses in a way that is peaceful in our soul, or we'll be broken by them. And we all have weaknesses. All of us, the most outrageously bold of us, all of us have these terrible weaknesses that we conceal and hide. But those of us who, if you can make peace with them and know exactly where the crack is and how to work around it, it's much better than to say I have no weaknesses, because then when weakness comes and haunts you from behind like a ghost, it will kill you. It'll kill you in your soul. And that's, I think, the downfall of people that are like, try to go into like your stereotypical movie alpha, to go into survival, because you cannot avoid the weakness that will come haunting you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And I'm just going to go ahead and give a shout out to one of our members, and that is Justin, who is a career military person and and is all about the heart and the soul work, and now going back and helping combat veterans do those hard parts. And so that's part of why, yes, that's part of why I love him and his perspective on this, is like he brings that well-rounded view of that kind of experience and what it takes to come out of it healed rather than further damaged. So props
Thank you for
to
pointing that out
Justin.
very much. I'm
Mhm.
glad we have someone like that here, and all the respect in the world, and even in the military. So, folks learn to wrestle through these things and to be successful and get through. But I think that I didn't want to generalize and say that everybody has problems getting through that. I'm glad that that's not the case. It's just, I didn't want to generalize by that way, but thank you, Justin. Yeah, big time.
So I see, speaking of Justin, he had a question in the chat, and then Greg is next, and then one from Barbara. And also, since I'm doing shout outs, Barbara was my 2nd and 3rd grade teacher, everybody. And it's so, so beautiful to have her in our community and on our calls. And she is definitely part of, a major influence in my young life that helped me be who I am. So love you, Barbara, and glad to have you on the call today. Justin asked, what was the first thing that you ate when you got home, Timber?
Moose jerky. Short answer is moose jerky. But I dreamed for months about pizza and beer, and I wanted pizza and beer so badly. And then when I left, I just, my body felt empty without a diet of fish. And so I've just been trying to get fish, and I just want to live on fish. And I'm still eating moose jerky, to be honest with you. And but yeah, that's the first thing I ate at base camp. We have the refeeding process where you take 10 days and you get refed. If it hadn't been for that, I'd have killed myself by trying to chug a beer and eat a pizza, because I had no self-control afterwards, none. And
you don't, it's like impossible. Like it's
yeah,
impossible to have self-control on the we would all do ourselves damage without it. And people did before they had the refeeding program.
doesn't surprise me to hear, because I thought I was a person with some good self-control, and then I realized I was putty in the hands of food. When I came out, I had nothing. And so it was good. And then on the airport on the way home, I'm like, I'm going to get a piece of pizza and beer. And even when it was in my hands, I didn't really want it, but I ate it, and I felt terrible for days. And I said, I've got to go back on a diet of fish and moose jerky.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it. Yeah. I really wanted to keep wild food as a primary part of my diet when I got out, and I wasn't allowed to on the refeeding program, which was so frustrating. Like I came out of Frozen. You can see me get on the helicopter with a bag that I crocheted out of my sweater full of mussels. I brought like 30 pounds of mussels out of my site with me, and they wouldn't let me have them. And then once I had graduated the refeeding program, then they said, now they're not safe for you to eat, Woniya, because they've been froze. They've been out of the water this whole time. And I'm like, do you not realize that I just survived for 50 days on these, and they were often out of the water? Like I feel like I know what mussels are good and not good at this point. And they wouldn't let me have them, and they wouldn't let me share them with Taylor. It was so frustrating.
That's awful,
But
because they're
yeah,
pretty tight about those rules, and they have good purpose behind it and all. But then you're like, let my body do its instinctual thing, man. I wanted this and I want that, but it's good that they
it's a
have that
liability
program.
for them, right?
Yeah.
Like if we ended up in the hospital because of that, then they'd be liable. So yeah.
Yeah.
Greg, nice to see you. It's been a while since we've had you on a call.
Okay, so yeah, really a pleasure to have both Woniya and Timber on this episode, or what I don't should call it episode, but the basic thing I wanted to say to Timber is I really, really appreciated you burying your meat in the cool ground. I have done that myself. I'd never seen anyone else do it, but it works really well in the Arctic where the ground is near freezing anyway. So I was just props to you for doing that. I was like so happy because I was worried that you were going to lose a lot of your meat. But then the second thing I wanted to ask you about was your ability to make a film, little skits out, film skits out there. I mean, that takes a level of awareness and being calm with your situation and be able to do something creative that it really impressed me. And I just wanted you to chat about what that mental process is like, to sort of say, okay, up against it all, I'm surviving out here, but now I'm going to sit back and make a little comic film.
Well, thank you. And about the moose meat, firstly, thank you. You've tried that yourself. And where I got that idea from was growing up as a kid, we had no electricity. And so we would milk a cow. And to get that milk to last longer, I went with my brothers to the creek, and we found a shady creek bank and dug a hole and lined it with rocks. And had cool water. And we would set the milk jars down in that water. And I was like, oh, this moose is on the ground and it's heating up. Because it had been frosty every morning. And then when I killed the moose, it just heated up. So it was worst case scenario. Just a bone crusher. And so I did that just to keep it cool, and barely made it, and I know that I haven't filmed much of the pile of jerky afterwards, and so some people get suspicious, but I'll tell you, no moose went to waste besides the brain. I wanted to eat the brain, but I couldn't, because I couldn't get to it. And those 3 lower legs that you'll see in one scene, those had marrow in them. And when I went back and I was done smoking the meat, I went back and those things smelled so bad. And I didn't realize at the time that marrow can still be good inside the bone. And so I messed up, because that marrow would have really helped. And the brain would have really helped too, but it had really turned, but I was so focused on the meat. But of the meat, we didn't lose any meat. Besides, I kept about 15 pounds out of not smoke it to just eat on until it went bad, to have some fresh while it smoked. And the last few handfuls of that turned, and then I used it for pike bait and got pike off of that. So that was just a soul crushing challenge, and it was hard. That's where I lost all my weight. And I figured, ironically, in the end, if I had never killed that moose, I'd have kept more weight, really, because I was catching fish like crazy, hammering fish during that time. Couldn't even keep up with smoking them all, And if I hadn't even killed the moose, I'd probably done better physically, and that's ironic. That's crazy to think of. But I hardly ate that whole week that I smoked the moose, because there wasn't time. I said, if this moose spoils, this will be my story forever, and I'll never live it down, And so I just worked, but we got it saved, and thank you. Thank you for that encouragement. And then about the skits and stuff, I have to find something to keep me going. I'm the kind of person that if I don't have something to look forward to, I can't live, And that's just kind of one of the problems or quirks that I have. But I think that being in some conflict zones have helped me to be more comfortable than I might have been otherwise in stressful situations, and then to have the creative space freed up, in the head a little bit, because I remember being in stressful situations for years, just get frozen, or get flummoxed, to where you're still operating, you're doing okay, but you don't have any space for anything else, like peace or skits, or love or anything, you're just getting through, you're just gritting it out, But then comes a time when you start to realize, I'm all right. I'm all right. I can relax more while I'm doing this. And Alone was good helping me there. But I think that experience helped me against like the drop shock type of stuff. I didn't really feel much drop shock, and then to have a little bit of space freed up in the brain to say, being creative will help me, And so it's just kind of based off of, I guess, just past experience a little bit. But then I'm an odd duck, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to put the moose head up there. And then I started putting it there, and I didn't really plan it out. I just started to put the moose head up there, and I was like, well, I should have torches going. So I get some torches going. I'm like, I should say something. And it just kind of happened that way. I didn't sit there and think on it too hard. I just started doing it. And then when I got done, I had a note where I told the editors through the camera, I was like, you could arrange it this way. And then I sat down and I thought, that is the dumbest thing that's ever been done. Thank you for bringing both of those things up, and just letting me chat about those for a second. I'm grateful.
It was awesome. I loved it. It was great. I did not have that kind of wherewithal. I was I told some jokes, but I didn't get creative with the filming. And I love how that's kind of become a thing more and more over Alone. And just, you know, one of the things that I always talk about is mindset and the importance of mindset out there, and how positive attitude is literally a survival skill, because if you're not bringing yourself back around, then you're literally in an adrenaline zone. You're in like fight or flight, and then your heart rate's going up, you are burning through your calories faster, you're making stupid choices, you literally lose some motor control in your hands. It's a serious issue. And so, you know, finding the way to bring yourself back, give yourself something to look forward to, keep yourself entertained, and humor, all of those things are true survival skills, and the show is really demonstrating that.
For sure, for sure. I think it's a bigger part of it than people realize. You know, like they think if you just got enough food, you'll be okay. That's only a small part. You know, if you, it gets hard in other ways. It gets so hard in other ways besides the diet.
And that's what I loved in this episode. And somebody did a, you know, on the chat, but like seeing William do a happy dance for the first time, like seeing some of that stoicism fall aside and seeing his wacky come out, and like I'm like, yes, it's working, William. Even though you're this like, you know, steady state stoic guy, you got to the point of doing a happy dance about food, and like that was so great. Yeah. Yes, Alice is bringing up my Thursday dance party. So one of the routines that I had on season 6 to give myself something to look forward to and to bring myself to that place of levity and gratitude was every Thursday I had a dance party, because I told myself if I'm not enjoying my time out here enough to dance about it, then I don't belong out here. So it was different every week, and they only showed it once in the episodes, and they never said that it was a weekly routine. But yes, every Thursday I did a dance party, and Alice has carried on the tradition and has a group of folks she emails with a little clip of dance music or like a YouTube about dancing on Thursdays. So yeah, thanks, Alice, for bringing that in. I want to pop to Barbara's question, and then we're going to be wrapping up. Barbara's question is really important and poignant. She asks, for the Alone participants who leave early and don't get the healing, and I would say this is going to be for any of them. A lot of people need a lot of healing, even if they stay out long time too. Don't get the healing transformational experience as counseling provided. What kind of emotional support do they have access to? Some might feel depressed and diminished. 100%. Yes, absolutely. Timber, would you like to speak to this?
Sure. I don't know if it's the same setup that they've had for previous seasons, but you can let me know, Woniya. We had a really good psychiatrist doctor on the team that helps do vetting. And that guy, he was like a magician to me, because he had me answer a few questions and then he just told me, so you're a driven person and you have problems with feeling worthy, you know, and you were going to work hard to compensate for that. That could hurt you out there. This is before the show. And I was just stumped, like, how did you know all this stuff? And it was just from answering some questions that he has. So he's a professional. It's been in it for a lot of years. And then when we come out of there, we have a number of appointments with him so that he can check up on us, you know, hear us out and speak into it, whatever we need. First time in my life I've ever been through something and had mental aftercare, you know, so that was a new experience, and it was great. You know, I would have given an arm and a leg to talk to him after I came out of Ukraine last time, you know, but then I had to go on alone to fix that one. But I told him that. I was like, dude, I wish you were there when I came out of Ukraine. He's like, well, I don't really do like trauma counseling anymore, because that's a tough one. But he does Alone, and I feel like it's a real key thing that the producers have keyed on to. So I don't know if it's always been that way in the past, but I felt fairly well cared for. But then I don't have a good reference point because I've never been around doctors or care at all. But I think for me it was pretty good, and I really hope that those contestants from this season who felt hurt by the thing as a whole were able to, through this doctor as well, get some solid viewpoint and perspective and help on it. But and no one's told me otherwise, you know. But there's a few contestants I don't stay super close with, but I think it's probably good for everyone. Woniya, is it the same guy possibly?
Yeah, and he's been since season 6, which is my first reference. Although I will say that it was set up different. Yeah, they want to make sure that you are mentally stable before going out there, because you know these are very challenging circumstances, and if you lose it out there, you could harm yourself. You could, you know, run off and be a big liability to the show. So it's very important to them. But we didn't have sessions before going out. But we did after coming out. And it's not, you know, as much as you want necessarily, but it's a certain amount. It depends how long you've been out there, how long they keep you. If you weren't very physically impacted, if you come out pretty early, then often they send you on your way sooner. But if you've been out for a long time, and both times I was out, you know, till the end of the season. So I had a lot of aftercare. I was pretty physically altered. And then right before the show comes out, because that's a whole nother thing. There's integrating your experience, and then there's getting ready for this intensely personal journey to be shown to millions of people all over the world. And that's a much bigger deal than most people realize. It is incredibly stressful seeing how your intimate journey is portrayed to the public, because it's going to be really different than you experience it, even if you have the best editing in the world. And I felt very disappointed with my editing on season 6. So it was emotionally really hard for me. I could have used more counseling then. And I also am a person who I feel like I'm pretty mentally healthy and had a good attitude and was able to bring myself around. Had that not been the case, I'm not sure if the show would have provided more counseling. They always say if you really need more support to reach out and let them know. And I think that they probably would show up for people to some degree in that case. They have done a better and better job by people over the years through seeing how necessary it is. They didn't have refeeding programs at first. I don't think they had psychological support aftercare either. But they, as opposed to a lot of these shows, I think they're good people. They care. They do show up for us. And the people that we actually interact with when we're out there, the producer on the ground, Raph, you saw him in the background, Dave Holder, the main survival guy, the medics, I mean, all of the people on the ground are really awesome, caring people. And that really comes through. Like, I feel so blessed because I don't hear great stuff about that with other shows. And I wouldn't want to be involved with those shows, obviously.
Just another on the mental health side note, and I could say that their team really is great and they care about the mental health of everyone. We see a lot of talk online about they should really vet these people before they let them on the show. And I would say that they do. They care about the mental health and they want people that are going to go on there for a long time. They really do. But you can't tell what's going to come up in the brain. You can't know that even yourself. And for me, I was surprised when something came up. I wasn't surprised when like war images and death would come up. I wasn't surprised about that at all. That had been haunting me. I was so on edge to go out there. I could hardly, and I think I can catch Molly's previous question back in the chat somewhere and capture that right here in this too. So it was tough for me to interact with my kids for a while because if a child cried, it ripped me up. It triggered me in some way. And I'd have a hard time, I'd be like, just gritting on your nerves because you're seeing some other child with a burn or a missing leg or something, and so that would come up and I couldn't sleep before I went out there. I was so messed up, and interacting with people was very hard. I would just be so bothered and on edge by everything. And then somewhere around where this episode leaves us, day 50 something, the ice starts cracking out there in the Arctic, and it sounded just like Russian 203 millimeter artillery guns. It sounded just like that. And then it also could sound like whales sometimes. But I walked out of my shelter and I looked for flashes because I'm like, that sounds just like artillery. But then I noticed something. I'm like, I didn't jump or sweat. I didn't do anything. And I looked at my body and it was still going on, like boom, it just started. And then it was like everywhere, like artillery. It was like outside of Kharkiv, just artillery everywhere. And I looked at me and I'm like, I'm well. I'm not jumping. I'm not spastic. And I was so flummoxed by how I could be okay. And then to capture Molly's question, that's one of the biggest differences for me being home is that I see my kids and I'm not triggered by anything. They cry and I can just be calm. And I'm like, it's fine, and it's the new lease on life about that. And the whole psychological care part had a big thing to do with that. But just that alone experience, like I couldn't tell how I could be okay on day 50 when the artillery started going off. But I was okay. It was magic,
Wow, that was so beautiful. Because yes, the ice cracking is very unsettling, but I don't have any PTSD from being in a war zone. So hard to imagine how that be. But what an amazing thing to experience out there. Like you can hear these things that trigger your PTSD, and you're not being triggered. That's amazing. What an illustration of the healing of deep wilderness immersion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, I think that's an amazing place to wrap up. I love wrapping on that note. So, oh my goodness, this was so amazing. Thank you guys. Yeah, thanks everyone for giving Timber such a warm welcome. And Timber, I think you can see what I was saying beforehand about just what a beautiful community and group of people this is. Just really heartfelt and present and like-minded. So yeah, such an awesome experience. And please let us know how we can continue to support you, and I'll ask you to share the information about your book so that I can share that directly with folks on Patreon. We'd love to stay connected.
I would love that as well. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys are wonderful, and sharing this whole thing with you guys is a treat. Thank you, Woniya, and thank you to each one of you. It's been just a special treat to join you in it all today. And thanks.
Timber, we can't wait to hear about your baby girl. So if you would drop me a line and let me know, and I can share that with everyone, I'm sure we would just be thrilled about that. See you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.